LaGuardia Airport, with its perpetual scent of burnt coffee and faint despair, wasn't how I pictured celebrating the biggest deal of my life. Yet, there I was, nursing a second gin and tonic while waiting to see if I'd make it onto the last flight back to Charlotte. I finished things a little faster, and all I wanted now was to get home as soon as possible. My name's Max Turner, by the way. Co-owner of a modest pharmaceutical company built by my late father. A business that kept my sisters and me comfortable but not quite jet-set wealthy. That was about to change. After 3 grueling days of negotiations, I'd finalized a deal to sell the company to a big pharma juggernaut. The payout? A cool $10 million for me alone, not counting a cushy 2-year transition gig. This sale meant a new chapter for my wife, Lauren, and me. Our twin daughters, Sam and Sarah, were wrapping up their junior year at Duke, draining my bank account in the process. With this windfall, though, the future suddenly felt wide open. As the gate agent announced my name, clearing me off the standby list, I drained the last of my gin, tossed a 20 on the bar, and sprinted to the gate. First class, no less. Maybe things really were turning around. The plane touched down in Charlotte a little past midnight. I could have driven myself home. I'd left my truck in airport parking, but after a long day, another gin, and the prospect of crawling into bed with Lauren, I opted for a taxi instead. As the cab pulled into my driveway, though, my stomach turned. A sleek black Audi, a model we didn't own, was parked in my spot. The house was dark. No porch light on to welcome me, no sign of life. My mind scrambled for innocent explanations. Maybe a family emergency had brought someone over? But Lauren hadn't mentioned anything during our call earlier that day. I stepped inside, the usual warmth of home replaced by an eerie stillness. The kitchen was spotless, not a single coffee mug or wine glass out of place. That's Lauren for you, neat freak to a fault. The walk up the stairs felt like a lifetime. At the top, the bedroom door stood slightly ajar. I could hear faint breathing. Pushing the door open, I froze. Lauren was sprawled naked across our bed, her arm draped over the chest of a man I didn't recognize. He was snoring softly, a smug smile plastered on his face. My chest felt like it had been hit with a sledgehammer. Lauren's quiet snoring, once a sound that lulled me to sleep, now felt like a cruel joke. The rage hit me first, white-hot and blinding. Then, the icy clarity of decision-making. Violence was an option, sure, but I didn't want to spend the rest of my life explaining a manslaughter charge to my daughters. No, I'd go for something far more lasting. First, pictures. A few angles to capture the happy couple in their natural habitat. Then I grabbed the guy's neatly folded clothes from the chair, tailored suit, polished shoes, and a wallet stuffed with cash and business cards. Franklin Thompson, senior sales rep at an Audi dealership. How fitting. I put his keys in my pocket, left the room and the house, and walked up to his car in the driveway. Sliding into the driver's seat, I marveled at how smooth it felt, a small consolation prize for my evening's revelations. I didn't drive far. Just far enough to a dingy motel where I could finally sleep and start planning. Revenge wasn't just going to be sweet. It was going to be gourmet. Morning came too quickly, and with it, the full weight of my new reality. Lauren's betrayal hadn't been a bad dream. The images on my phone, and Franklin's wallet sitting on the nightstand, confirmed that. The first order of business, recon. After grabbing a quick coffee, I drove Franklin's Audi to the address on his license. It was a tidy suburban house, upper middle class, complete with a basketball hoop over the garage and a couple of bikes leaning against the side. I parked across the street and watched for movement. A woman answered the door, mid-30s, with a frazzled look that screamed mom of young kids. I went up and holding up Franklin's ID, I introduced myself. I think we need to talk. Her eyes darted from the Audi to the wallet in my hand. Her face went pale as realization dawned. Come inside, she said in a low voice. Her name was Molly Thompson, and if she wasn't already suspicious about Franklin's extracurricular activities, she was now. I laid it out as gently as I could, minus the explicit details of what I'd walked in on. Your husband and my wife. Well, let's just say they're a little too comfortable around each other. She didn't cry. Her expression hardened, a mix of hurt and anger bubbling just below the surface. Do you have proof? I showed her the photos. She didn't flinch. Instead, she straightened her back like she was bracing for war. "I'll need copies," she said, her voice cold. "No problem," I replied. "I can send them to you. But for now, I have a plan that might help us both." So I approached Molly with a proposal. "I'll keep this car for a while. It's in your name, and I think you'll be okay with it." She smiled. "Franklin loves that car more than he loves me. Keeping it out of his hands is revenge enough for now." And she gave me a handwritten note of permission. Back at the motel, I strategized. If Franklin thought he was going to slide back into his suburban life unscathed, he was in for a rude awakening. Meanwhile, Lauren had called me twice that morning. I ignored both. Her texts started rolling in around noon. "Lauren, Max, I'm so sorry. Can we please talk? Lauren, I love you. This doesn't change that. Please come home so we can work this out." Work this out? My wife of 20 years, the mother of my kids, had brought her lover into our bed. The audacity of her texts made me laugh. I sent one reply. "Max, we'll talk soon. Don't go anywhere." She didn't know it yet, but her world was about to implode. By mid-afternoon, Franklin's day was also spiraling out of control. According to Molly, he'd returned home around lunchtime, only to find the house locked, his spare key missing, and his wife running errands with their kids. Desperate to get inside, he broke a back window, triggering the alarm. The neighbors called the cops before he even made it through the frame. And when the police came and asked him to stop and identify himself, he didn't want to, shouting that he was the owner of the house. So let's just say that his detention was a little bit tougher than it could have been, and he got a boost not only from waking up in the morning without his belongings in his car, but also from a police stun gun and a baton. When Molly returned, Franklin was sitting in the back of a police car, handcuffed and barefoot, wearing a ridiculous combination of sweatpants and a pink sweater that Lauren had put together for him. The sight of him apparently brought her no small amount of satisfaction. When I asked if they could keep him overnight, one of the cops laughed. Molly told me later. But they let him go with a trespassing warning. Franklin's humiliation was only beginning. That evening, I finally called Lauren. "Max." Her voice was shaky, almost pleading. "Thank God you called." "Save it," I said, cutting her off. "Meet me tomorrow at Center Cafe, 6 p.m. She hesitated. The cafe was where we'd first met, and for years, it had been our go-to spot for anniversaries and celebrations. "Okay," she whispered. "Don't be late," I said, then hung up. I wasn't planning a romantic reconciliation. Lauren was about to learn what happens when you gamble everything and lose. Center Cafe hadn't changed much since the first time I walked through its doors 20 years ago. The warm lighting, the smell of roasted coffee, and the hum of quiet conversations brought back memories I wasn't eager to dwell on. I arrived early, nursing a black coffee at a corner table with a clear view of the entrance. When Lauren walked in, I could see the weight of guilt hanging on her shoulders. Her usually perfect posture was slouched, and her eyes darted nervously around the room until they landed on me. "Max," she said, forcing a smile as she slid into the seat across from me. "Thank you for meeting me." I didn't return her smile. Instead, I leaned back in my chair, studying her. "You wanted to talk. Go ahead." She faltered. I don't even know where to start. "I'm so sorry. What I did it was wrong. Unforgivable. But I love you, Max. I love our family. I want to fix this." Her words hit like a hollow drum. I took a slow sip of coffee, letting the silence stretch. "You love me?" I asked finally, my voice flat. Funny way of showing it. Tears welled up in her eyes. "It was a mistake. A terrible mistake. I never meant to hurt you. I swear it was just—" "Don't," I interrupted, my tone sharper now. "Don't insult me with excuses. You didn't trip and fall into bed with him, Lauren. You invited him into our home, into our bed. Did you think about me at all? About our daughters?" Her tears spilled over. "I wasn't thinking. It didn't mean anything, Max. I was just—" she trailed off, struggling for words. "You were just selfish," I finished for her. "You risked everything we built, our marriage, our family, for what? A sleazy car salesman who barely kept his shirt on in his own promotional photos. Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then the image of her and Franklin flashed in my mind, and any sympathy I had evaporated. She reached across the table, trying to take my hand. I pulled away, and then leaning forward so my words hit her like a dagger. "Do you know what hurt the most, Lauren?" I asked, my voice low but cutting. "It wasn't seeing you with him. It was realizing that I'll never hear you snore again. That stupid, quiet snore I used to love because it meant you felt safe with me." Her sobs broke through now, loud enough to draw a glance from the couple at the next table. She buried her face in her hands. After that night, I did a little research and discovered something. 3 men, I said, my tone ice cold. She looked up, confused. "You've slept with 3 men during our marriage, haven't you? Don't bother denying it, I know." Her mouth opened, then closed again. Finally, she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "But Max, I stood abruptly, cutting her off. "I've heard enough." Her head snapped up, panic in her eyes. "Max, please. We can get through this. I'll do whatever it takes. Counseling, therapy, anything. Just please don't give up on us." I leaned over the table, keeping my voice low but firm. "I already did. That night, when I walked into that room and saw what you'd done. It's over, Lauren. You'll be served with divorce papers tomorrow. Get a lawyer." Her face fell, her tears flowing freely now. I didn't wait for her response. I turned and walked out of the cafe, leaving her sitting there, broken. As I stepped into the crisp evening air, I felt a strange sense of calm. The pain was still there, sharp and raw, but so was a grim satisfaction. The game wasn't over yet. Leaving Lauren at the cafe wasn't the finale, it was just the intermission. If she thought tears and pleas would soften me, she hadn't been paying attention for the last 2 decades. I wasn't interested in closure or reconciliation. I wanted consequences. The next morning, my lawyer, Anna Reinhardt, had the divorce papers ready to go. A no-nonsense woman in her 50s, Anna had the demeanor of someone who'd seen it all. When I explained the situation, she didn't even blink. "Infidelity makes for a clean break, Max," she said, sliding the papers across the desk. "You've got the photos, and you've kept your company assets separate from the marriage. She can't touch the sale money. The house, alimony, those are negotiable, but we'll make sure you don't get taken to the cleaners." I nodded. "I don't want to leave her destitute, Anna, but I'm not going to let her walk away unscathed either." She smirked. "Good. Because that's exactly how I like to work." By the afternoon, Lauren had been served. Lauren certainly did not expect this. A process server, a seemingly ordinary, simple, cheerful man, somewhat similar to a pizza delivery man, delivered the papers directly to her home. He captured the moment with a quick photo, the flash catching Lauren's bewildered face as she stared at the envelope. When Lauren called me, I didn't pick up. She left a voicemail, her voice cracking with desperation. "Max, please call me. We need to talk about this. I know I messed up, but please don't throw everything away." I deleted the message without listening to the end. Meanwhile, Franklin's humiliation was reaching its peak. Molly, his wife, was not only furious but methodical. The morning after his arrest, she had a locksmith change every lock in their house, and she emptied their joint accounts into a private one in her name. Franklin, apparently still nursing a bruised ego, and possibly a bruised rib from that taser, was scrambling to save face at work. To make things worse, Molly had taken it upon herself to inform Franklin's boss, a no-nonsense woman in her late 40s, that Franklin's business trip to Atlanta had been anything but professional. "Turns out your senior sales rep has been test driving more than cars," Molly had told her, presenting the evidence with icy precision. By the end of the week, Franklin's job was hanging by a thread. My next move involved Lauren's social circle. I wasn't cruel enough to air her dirty laundry to the world, but a few well-placed comments ensured the right people, her closest friends, got the full picture. We each had our own account, and we also had a shared one, and a group chat that I happened to stumble upon that was on her old iPad was a goldmine. These women shared everything, from Pilates schedules to who was sleeping with whose husband. Lauren's carefully curated image as a loyal wife and doting mother was about to take a hit. I sent an anonymous message from my other account to the chat, attaching a blurry version of one of the photos. The caption was simple. Your perfect friend isn't so perfect. Ask her about Franklin. The fallout was immediate. By the next day, Lauren was inundated with calls and texts from her friends, half of them pretending to care, the other half salivating over the drama. Her social standing, the one thing she valued almost as much as her family, was crumbling. When she called me again, her voice was hollow. "Why are you doing this to me, Max?" she whispered. I didn't bother sugarcoating it. "Because you made a choice, Lauren. And now you're living with the consequences. Enjoy the view from the bottom." The week after I filed for divorce, I found myself sitting at a bistro in Charlotte, staring out at a rain-soaked street. My daughters, Sam and Sarah, sat across from me, their expressions a mix of worry and confusion. "Dad," Sarah started hesitantly, Mom called. "She said you're divorcing her." Straight to the point, I thought. I admired that about her. "Yes," I said simply. "Your mom and I are getting a divorce." Sam's jaw tightened. "Why? What happened?" I took a deep breath. "Your mom cheated on me." I let the words hang in the air, watching their faces shift from shock to anger. "I found her in our bed with another man." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Sarah slammed her palm against the table, her voice trembling. "Are you serious? How could she do that to you? To us?" Sam's reaction was quieter, her eyes welling with tears. "I thought you two were solid," she said softly. "How long has this been going on?" I shook my head. "It doesn't matter now. What matters is that it's over. I've already started the divorce process." "Good," Sarah snapped. "She deserves it." "Sarah," I started, but she cut me off. "No, Dad. Don't defend her. She betrayed you. She betrayed us. And she's going to have to live with that." The conversation shifted to practical matters, finances, living arrangements, what the divorce might mean for their upcoming senior year at Duke. I reassured them that their education was secure, that the sale of the company ensured they wouldn't have to worry about money. "What about you?" Sam asked. "Are you okay?" It was a fair question. And the truth was, I didn't know yet. "I will be," I said finally. "I've spent most of my life taking care of other people. Your grandparents, my sisters, your mom, you too. Now it's time to focus on me for a change." They exchanged a glance, as if unsure whether to believe me. "What does that mean?" Sarah asked. "It means I'm not going to let this define me," I said. "I've got a bucket list a mile long, and I think it's time to start ticking things off." By the end of the brunch, we were laughing, tentatively, but genuinely. I walked them to their car and hugged them tightly, promising to check in regularly. "Don't let her drag you down, Dad," Sam said before they drove off. "You deserve better." For once, I agreed. Back at the motel that evening, I got a call from Molly. "Max, you're not going to believe this," she said, her tone laced with dark amusement. "Try me," I replied. "Franklin's dealership fired him. Let's say, word got around about his little adventures. They said it was a matter of preserving the company's reputation." I chuckled. "Good for them. And you?" "I'm fine," she said. "The postnup is signed, and Franklin's officially on a leash. If he so much as looks at another woman, I'll have him out on the street faster than he can say Audi." "Glad to hear it," I said. "You deserve better too, Molly." "Thanks, Max. And hey, keep the car as long as you need. Consider it a parting gift from Franklin." By the end of the week, Franklin's Audi was parked in front of a seedy used car lot, sold for a fraction of its value. Molly had signed over the title to me as part of her own twisted revenge against her husband. As for me, I used the cash to book a trip to the Rockies. It was time to clear my head and start planning the rest of my life. Each climb, each blister, each freezing gust of wind reminded me that pain is temporary, but the strength you build from it lasts. By the time I returned to Charlotte, I felt like a new man. Lauren, on the other hand, wasn't faring so well. Word of her affair had spread through her social circle like wildfire. Friends who used to flock to her wine nights were suddenly too busy. Even the most loyal ones struggled to look her in the eye. The divorce settlement left her with half of the house and a modest alimony check. About our daughters, they were enough adults now, free to decide for themselves how much contact they wanted with their mother. They didn't choose much. 6 years later, I stood at Sarah's wedding, watching her dance with her new husband. Lauren was there too, seated at a corner table with her date, a balding, unremarkable lawyer who looked like he'd spent the last decade filing parking ticket appeals. I barely recognized her. The confident, vibrant woman I'd married was gone, replaced by someone smaller, dimmer. Across the room, my girlfriend, Elena, waved at me. She was everything Lauren wasn't: adventurous, down-to-earth, and fiercely loyal. We'd met on a climbing trip in Patagonia and had been inseparable ever since. As I crossed the room to join her, I caught Lauren's eye. For a brief moment, I saw regret there. But I didn't stop. Some things are better left in the past.